Good afternoon, all you beautiful people. Welcome to the Infinite Think Live Podcast. I'm your host, Kenya Cook, with my great friend, Mr. Richard Roundtree.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Facebook, Instagram, and everybody in the social media world. Thank you very much for listening today and following us. It's always a great pleasure.
This is an awesome day for us, guys, and I just want to thank you for participating with the Infinite Think podcast today. We're running a little bit late, but we're here, and we're going to have some great, interesting things that we're going to talk about today. Remember, we're on this journey into becoming the best version of ourselves, and we're reaching out to some awesome people that we know and inviting them to come onto our show and share their secrets with you with the goal of helping you become the best person that you can be. And as always, my good brother Richard has some exciting things going on in his life. Brother, why don't you enlighten us? What's going on in the world of Richard?
Well, I just did a nice little hike. It's been raining this whole entire week in California. I'm sure you guys on the East Coast and in Detroit are getting that storm that we just had here. But today it's just really been really beautiful in Los Angeles. I went on a nice little hike and just always enjoying nature. I think that's something that we always forget. We're on our iPhones and our Netflix shows, our Amazon shows, and we forget just the best entertainment out there is just pure nature. So that's what I got to say.
It's pretty cool. I saw the guy that said that if you have to listen to music at the beach, you need to leave the beach.
Well, I think that's I know that. I see people that all the time. They're missing out on the beautiful sound of the ocean. I caught myself doing that too because I jog on the beach a lot, and then I was like, why am I listening to like Jay-Z? I can just be listening to the ocean. I can listen to Jay-Z anytime I want to. So that's a good thing. And I think it's a good note for all of us just to, sometimes detox off of all the Spotify, all this constant stimulation and entertainment because it is kind of like driving us all, a little bit nutty, I think.
It does. It does. Let's just get away. Let's just let our bodies just enjoy the environment around us. Let nature go ahead and just heal us. Let our minds just empty out. So I think that's important sometimes to just, decompress. We talk about the Black Sea Living Bitters, the importance of detoxing, but just detoxing from the world. These are, once again, things I think are important for us as we continue to be the best versions of ourselves. Well, we don't want to belabor the point too much. Last week we had a great conversation with Diana Bainu, and we had the exploration, the topic of being proactive. It was perfect how she pointed out the importance of starting your journey the right way by taking, moments to find out what your passion is, find out something that you are good at, find something that inspire you, understanding that you can start your journey right where you're at. Being proactive, start where you're at and begin that journey. So we're going to segue this week and we're going to talk to, Mr. David Greenwood. But before we go into that, Richard, did you have any takeaways from last week's show?
I just love the way, first of all, I just love her whole demeanor, just a real class act person. She's a total class act. But the biggest takeaway, I think, is saying that you don't need much to just get started, or just to be proactive. She talks about how she does interior design, and she's doing this stuff with a minimalist approach. Not spending a lot of money, not going to a little fancy furniture store, but just simple things just to get it going. I think so like we talked about earlier, we're in such a constant search for like stimulation and trying to get something bigger, better, the best. This idea of the best, there's something always better. We're not content with what we have right here and right now, and using what we have right here and right now. I think that's what she really drove home, and that's good for a lot of people to know that they can start right now. They don't need to have the bombest whatever they think they need. They just need to start right now and just go for it right now because you have everything you need right here and right now. And I think she drove that point home.
She did. So Diana Bainu, please check her out. She's on YouTube. She's on Facebook. If you're interested in just making your home look beautiful on a budget, I think some of the things she bought came from the dollar store, and it looked amazing. It looked great. So our next guest, this is a proud honor here to introduce my friend, Mr. David Greenwood. David is the executive director of Detroit PALF. He has over 27 years career experience as a professional firefighter with the Southfield Fire Department as well as the Birmingham Fire Department, where he served as a firefighter and EMT and inspector.
Yeah, and he's a native Detroiter. Detroit represent. You know, David is an
Detroit.
alumnus of St. Martin de Porres High School. That's not Inkster High School, but you know, St. Martin de Porres High School. Well, I'm looking at my notes. He's won 2 state championships and 1 city title under Hall of Fame coach Ed Rachel. I mean, he remained very active in his alma mater by teaching physical education and health and assistant coaching with the boys and girls basketball teams, and served as a board member from 1991 to 2005.
David studied fire science and criminal justice at Lake Superior State University, lettering in basketball lettering in basketball during his time. I'm reading my notes too. David is also a 4-year mentor for the former Detroit mayor and NBA Hall of Famer Dave Bing's Bingo Youth Institute, and proud husband and father. And David is also a dope DJ, so please welcome David to Infinite Think.
You guys did a whole lot of research there. I had no idea y'all knew all that about me, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me aboard, man. This whole thing with the Infinite Think podcast is pretty cool, man. So I'm honored and pleasure to be here.
We're happy that you're joining us, David, because we think it's important that people see folks like you, like me, like Richard, who are trying to make a difference in their lives and in their community, and we're just all starting right where we're at. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's no problem. My pleasure.
So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Our traditional format is we like to ask our guests 3 questions. I'll ask you 2 of the questions. We're going to have some discussion, and Richard's going to ask you a 3rd question. But this show is titled, though, The End Game. And the end game comes from the concept of beginning with the end in mind. Oftentimes we've heard that, hey, if you want to do something, just go do it. But what is that it? What is that thing that we're trying to get to? Because I believe that that's where we're going to find our motivation. So starting from that point, David, what is the end game for you?
And, the end game can mean a bunch of different things. But to me, I can think about the end game, for my career. But, you always have different things that you think about. So one of the things that one of my buddies and my mentor always says, I see some resolving some issues here on my screen. So you guys are fading in and out. But anyway, one of the things that one of my mentors always shares with me is think about what you think about. Think about that for a minute. Think about what you think about. So as I go back and you asked me the question about what does the end game mean to me? I've thought about end game at many different times. And when you get to that end or get to that point, you refocus. So I'm not the same man with the same thoughts at 50 as I was at 40, because the end game meant something different at 40 than it does today. And the same thing, I think if you go back in decades, you go back to your high school years, you'll think about what you were thinking about at that moment. And your vision today won't be, if you could say at 48 or 47, 46, 49, 48, 50 years old, however old you are right now, what would you advise the 17-year-old Kenya Cook or the 17-year-old Richard Roundtree? What would you advise that individual? So to answer your question, my end game at different points in my life has always been something different. Now my end game, as I just turned 50 in November, is thinking about my legacy. When my daughter was born, she's 13 years old, it caused me to reflect on who I am as a man, who I am as a black man, and how I want her to remember me, and how I want my legacy to continue on in her. So a friend of mine, and a friend of yours, Kenya, has a father-in-law who they made a movie about. And I'm talking about Darren Merritt, right? So Darren's father-in-law is Herman Boone from the movie Remember the Titans. Denzel Washington played his part. He came into my life at a time where he served like as a second dad or that uncle figure, right? And when he would talk to me about certain things, it was like he was talking to a brick wall, because if you know about my history at St. Martin de Porres High School, we won state championships. That's what we did. So it was nothing that this man coming from Virginia could tell me about high school football and winning state championships that was going to change my perspective on the end game. And so as I got to know him better, I found out that that end game for him is his legacy. What is he leaving behind? So when they announced that they were making this, originally it was like they were going to do a short story on him. Then it was a movie made for TV. Then it became a big screen production. And I told him, I said, man, it caused me to reflect. Like, what kind of legacy am I going to leave for my children? He's leaving a legacy, no matter how long, 10, 20 years from now, his grandchildren and his children will be able to turn on Disney Channel and see that movie, Remember the Titans. So I think I would say the end game means, how do we as black men propose to our people, our loved ones, those who are people that don't even know you, people that have no direct interaction with you right now. How are you going to be remembered and reflected upon 20 years, 30 years, 50 years from now? So that's where I am with the end game. Now, if you had asked me at 17, what would my end game have been? My end game would have been to make it to the league and make all this money and do all these, superficial things. But as I think as we all age, we begin to look at things in a different prism or different scope or different perspective. And so that's what the end game means to me. Make sense?
Deep. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So basically saying your concept of end game is always changing, always evolving, and it's very fluid. And based on, because through life we get different vantage points in life. We have a different prism or a different point of view, as you eloquently said. So yeah, I totally agree. Because I know what I want at 18 is totally different than what I want now in my 40s. So
Right. And I think if we don't think about those things, think about what you think about. Why do you think about the things that you think about today versus what you thought about years ago?
That's so deep. Think about what you think about. So it's like you're kind of like observing your thoughts. I think a lot of times we get so caught up in our thoughts, we don't even get a chance to observe our thoughts. And I think that's actually a practice that we do in a lot of like mindful meditation, is that we just kind of sit there and don't analyze our thoughts, but just look at our thoughts as a casual observer. And I think that gives us a lot of insight on what we need to really do in life if we just really see our thoughts. Because our thoughts is, even though they can be a hindrance, they can also be a guide if we use it properly.
Absolutely, I agree. So
that's powerful.
Yeah. So now I'll just add to it that I think when we don't reflect and evolve our thoughts, I think we kind of stop living. That's how I feel anyway. I want to learn something new every day. If it's a quote, if it's a belief, if it's something that somebody has done out there, something that someone has done that has affected the way that I think, I want to dig into that and understand why that's come to be. So I was that kid always to say, mom and dad said, do such and such, such and such. And I would always say, but why? So I want to know why. So even as a 50-year-old, that's something that hasn't changed in me. I'm always asking why. Why are we in where we are today at dealing with number 45 in DC? How does that happen? I mean, really, truly, think about the end game as it pertains to how our history in as Black Americans, as African Americans, how has our history repeated itself? You know what I'm saying?
I agree. I mean, if you want to get, I don't know if this may be getting a little bit off topic, talking about number 45, and I just keep it brief, but it's kind of almost like if you guys are familiar with the William Lynch letters, it's like still a lot of us are African Americans are still kind of, we didn't go out and vote, because we still have that sense of hopelessness, that sense of like, that we don't have that power. And even though there's not shackles on us physically, the shackles are still on a lot of us mentally. So I think that's where that's what it's like Jay-Z said, you can trap my body, but you can't never trap my mind. So you can lock my body, you can trap. So we got to untrap our minds first. And I think, so that's what 45 is teaching us, a lesson that he's a lesson for us, that we need to, we need to free our minds.
To bring that full circle. to bring that full circle, it does relate to your end game mentality, your thought. Like, how do you get, I don't know if you guys have kids, but how do you get that? How do we get to the point where we don't wind up reliving the negative history in the past, that so we don't have somebody like a 45? Because 45 is not new. He's just new in our lifetime. He's just, he's Richard Nixon on steroids, right? So let's be honest, there were others before him. So we're just reliving. We had a history of, having presidents that weren't so, overtly racist. So that's not new. So how do we revisit that in our end game discussion? How do you get back to where we were with number 44? So that's what I look at, and I always say, again, one of my mentors in life, and I got many mentors, people that have touched my life in many different ways, but he always said there's a seed time and there's a harvest time, and we don't always reap the benefit of the seeds that we water. Sometimes we're putting water on seeds and we'll never see that flower or that tree blossom. So we just have to continue to water the root and change the quality or the value of the fruit that we take off the tree. So a lot of times, a lot of our intervention, and this is, again, my end game, is, as you read in my bio, I've always been about mentoring and tutoring and working with youth. And a lot of what I see as problematic in our community is we're always trying to fix it after the fact. We're trying to reach young men after they're incarcerated, where we can reach them while they're young. And at Detroit PAL, our philosophy, our mentality is, let's get the kids while they're young, because what usually comes with a kid who is, 5, 6, 7 years old, they're not driving themselves to practice, right? They usually bring in a parent. So if we can implement some parental components into what we're doing with their kids and get the parent and the kid engaged, now we can mentor and we can coach not just the sport, but life. And we can relate sport to life and life to sport. Now we're affecting change, not just for a kid, but also for the adult that's bringing them to the event. And once they turn 15, 16 years old, they're driving themselves. They're making their own decisions. And a lot of times it's more difficult for us. So that's not watering the root. That's like watering the bark or the trunk of the tree, right? But it all has to trickle down to the root in order to change the quality of the fruit that tree bears.
And that's going back to the William Lynch letter. They fed us a poisonous programming back then. So now it's time to start feeding the new generations a different type of programming that's going to be positive and powerful and empowering. So so they can always be free in any situation, in any condition that they're in. They can always be free and always be abundant.
Right. I think that's important. Let me jump in here real quick, guys, and point something out. Because you have the mindset of where you want to go, you started to look at things that were going on as an opportunity. Whereas that, hey, it's a problem that this 7-year-old can't get to practice. That's messing us up. He's missing practice, this, that, and the third. Instead of saying, wait a minute, this is an opportunity to connect with the parent and now get a support system for them at home. Because if I'm correct, David, when we spoke earlier this week, you guys were talking about even job services or job placement help for parents, correct?
Right. Yep.
So because you knew where you wanted to be at, your problems or became challenges became opportunities to be even a greater service or a greater benefit of watering that root.
So the bottom line is, a lot of times we see the kids come in with a with a parent at a certain age, and a lot of times those parents see sports is the universal language. Everybody kind of gets along when you talk about sports. But when we talk about academics, a lot of times that kid that's 6, 7 years old that may be behind in reading or math, it's not just the kid, it's usually the parent as well. So if you're dealing with literacy issues and you deal just only with that kid is going to run into a monumental roadblock because the parent, 9 times out of 10, is suffering from the same issues, but is embarrassed to seek the help. But if we can get them at a young age, the parent then breaks down and says, look, it's not too late for me. How many times have you seen like a teenager involved with their parent, where the parent is going to openly admit that he or she has educational issues or deficiencies, and feel, the need to go seek the help with that child, with that teen? It doesn't happen. But when they're small, they're more inclined to go before, a tutor or a mentor, or, go back to school themselves, because they realize the need to be able to help their own child, grow. But if I'm 30 some odd years old and I got a teenager, and I got to admit to my teenager that, hey, I'm not very good in math, or I can't read, I'm reading on the second grade, third grade level as an adult, that's going to build up so many roadblocks. And that's when you talk about the Willie Lynch thing, it's like, let me go back. Each one teach one. Well, if you can't teach one because you've never been taught, then how are we progressing, right? So the end game in all of that is about everybody just manning up or womaning up and saying, hey, I gotta get what I gotta get so that my child, my legacy, can live on and strengthen him or her along the way. And we can't do that because a lot of us are too prideful in order to, just come to the table and say, here's what I don't know. And go ahead.
No, I'm listening. I agree with you like wholeheartedly. Like I think that's like the problem. Like everybody say, oh, it's the education, The education is a problem a lot in the inner city. But think about this: if you give a kid a great education and he comes back home to a household that's very negative, that's like taking a shower and going back out and playing in the mud. So
right.
We have to treat this as a whole. We have to we have to train both the parents and the kids.
Yep.
And we got to give them tools and resources to win.
And the only way we can do that is, and that's why I'm always very skeptical of politicians that say, they're going to do all of these things, and they never include social issues or social justice in their conversation. Because until you deal with social issues, how can I? It's very difficult to teach kids who are starving, because they're not thinking about what you're talking about on the smart board. They're thinking about, man, I sure am hungry. The last thing I had to eat was a bag of Cheetos, right? That's what they're thinking about. That's their reality, is like, forget what he's saying. I'm hungry as hell, right? Yep. And so a lot of times you can't get, that's the first hurdle. So now we got to talk about nutrition, right? We got to talk about some social issues. I'll give you an example. Had one of my first mentees that I had working with Dave Bing. Every day he came to school smelling like marijuana. Once a week I met with him, he smelled like marijuana. Well, it wasn't because he was smoking. It wasn't because he was the only person smoking marijuana. His mother smoked marijuana. So they're smoking marijuana together. So who am I? Who are his teachers to tell him, based on the fact that when he comes to school for 6 or 8 hours a day, he sees one thing, but when he goes home, he sees something totally different. So now, totally different. And I'm not judging anybody. It is what it is. But let's be real about it. Let's say, okay, let's stop judging one another based on those habits, right? Whether you agree with medicinal marijuana use or legalized marijuana or whatever, the end game is the fact that this kid is going to grow up in an environment where it's not conducive for him to learn. Why? Because mom is spending all her money on marijuana, no money on this kid's education. She's not coming to parent-teacher conference. She's not, all of these things are prohibiting her from getting gainful employment to provide for her child. So that kid is being left in the dark. So until you deal with social issues, we're going to have what we've always had.
Exactly. Yep.
Boy, I tell you what, I knew it was about to get real when Dave took off his glasses. When the glasses come off, it's about to get real. So I'm going to grab some of this momentum and fire, and I'm going to turn this into my next question because I'm loving the fire. So, okay. Dave, when did you realize, or when did you begin to value in-game thinking?
I don't even know that I knew what in-game thinking was, but as I reflect back, I think high school, probably high school, when you start thinking about what you want to do, where you want to go. Some of the steps I always tell my wife, I'm just blessed. I'm blessed, and when I think about how my whole life has evolved, you can always think like, well, what if I had done this? Well, where would I be today? Or what if things had gone that way? Where would I be today? And honestly, you can never say, well, because you just don't know. I mean, you really don't know. So I'll give you an example, my own perspective, my own life story. So I started off at Redford High School. And back in those days, Redford was like 4,000 kids strong, 4,000 students strong. It was jam packed. When I started at Redford, I had never played organized basketball a day in my life. And a group of my friends, we were walking to school one day, and they said, "You gonna come out for the basketball team?" I said, "No, man, I'm a baseball guy. I love baseball. I'm playing baseball." They said, "Man, you crazy. No girls come to baseball games. They all come to the basketball." And it caused me at 14 years old to go, got a point there. So long story short, baseball was my best sport, but I chose to go out for basketball because that's what my friends were doing. So long story short, I was only one of two of the six of us that made the team. So now I'm playing with a bunch of guys I don't know, playing a sport that I really don't care about, that I'm average at best in. Well, because I did work hard and my father made me finish everything that I started, I got better, and then I kind of grew to like the game and I grew to love the game eventually. It pushed me to get recruited by St. Martin de Porres. So I transitioned to St. Martin de Porres, and all of a sudden I got a group of guys saying, "Hey, man, you got potential." And I don't even realize it. And I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see what you're talking about, right? The next thing I know, I'm being recruited for colleges, and I wind up going to school for free. Had I not made that decision to play basketball, would I still gone to school free? Would I transition from Redford to DePores and got the opportunity to meet my wife, got an opportunity, so all of those things, how they happen, I'm like, that was the blessing. It could have happened in many different ways. I could have wound up at Southfield High. I could have wound up in Georgia. I had an offer to go to high school down in Georgia, but I went down there and it was too hot and there was too many bugs. And I said, no, I can't deal with that. Right. So it's all about like the decisions that you make. And so I didn't realize it at the time, Kenya, but that was me realizing my end game. Like, okay, the end game is to get college paid for and not have any college debt. So it was short term, it was short sighted. Like, all you want to do is college. Well, what do you want to do? And I remember going into my sophomore year at Lake Superior State thinking, me and my roommate, what are we going to do for the rest? When we grad, I got to get in a 4-year program to keep my degree. And it was my brother-in-law who said, you know what, you should look into fire science. And I'm like, what? What is that? And what was appealing about his job, because he was a Detroit firefighter for 38 years, was the amount of time that he was off. So I'm like, you mean you only work 9 days a month? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that sounds like the kind of gig I want, So for the purposes of having time off and being able to do what I want to do, that's what steered me into that. So as luck would have it, or as the blessing would have it, or as the end game would eventually reveal itself, Lake Superior State was one of 2 universities in the state of Michigan, Madonna College being the other, what's now Madonna University, was the other college that had a fire science program. So that's what I majored in. So the end game, like I came home from school, got an internship with the City of Detroit Fire Department, and thinking like, I don't know, I worked for the City of Detroit. They had a hiring freeze, which led me to Southfield because the guy that worked in Detroit knew a guy that had retired and was the recruiter in Southfield. So in 1990, I was the 4th African American. And Kenya, you grew up in that area. You know what that area is like. In 1990, how many African American? It was probably 60, 70% African American population in Southfield in the early 90s,
That's
right?
Right.
There were no African Americans on the Southfield Fire Department at that time. the end game for me was always short-sighted. It was always like, okay, what's next? What's next? And then I think as I evolved again as a man, you step from your teenage years to your manhood years, then you start realizing like, man, I need to do something that, is going to sustain my family. So what can I do to sustain my family? And at that time, it was like a job with a pension, right? And so that's what I wound up doing. Did I have that intent in mind at 17, 18, 19? No. But every time I set an end game, it was in short segments, and I just built upon those segments. So it was like, okay, get to college, get it paid for. Then it was like, get a job, get a career. And I always tell kids, what's the difference between a job and a career? So I'm gonna ask you guys, what do you guys see as a difference between a job and a career?
Oh, for me,
Grab that one.
a job, I don't know. I think a job is like something that's a task, something you got to do to pay the bills, whereas a career is something that you're passionate about and it brings you joy in life.
Spot on, spot on. So your
Yeah.
career is your passion. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be what you make money at. Darren's mom always told us, figure out what your passion is, and then figure out a way to make money at it, and you'll never work a day in your life.
I
Right?
love that.
Darren's
Yeah.
mom always told that. And that was Darren's mom was like my second mom growing up. Darren's mom and my mom worked together at Mishcon for years. And she always said, figure out what your passion is, figure out a way to make money at it. You'll never work a day in your life. Hence, Darren and I DJing all of these years. Hence, my job here at PAL has always been, it's like it just happened. It just happened. But I say it's the blessings, but it is tradition. I mean, truly, it is the end game in sight for me. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I don't know how long. I came in, I said, well, I'll do 5 years. We'll see. I might do a year. I don't know how long I'm gonna be here. But it's the blessing that is part of who I am. Everywhere that I go, it always seems to work out in the end. It might not go as exactly the way that I had planned, because Southfield didn't work out the way that I had planned it. So that's how I wound up in Birmingham. But I'll be damned if it didn't work out great in Birmingham, because it gave me the opportunity to do what I'm doing now. So the blessings have just always continued, even though, in those short moments from spot to spot or point to point in my life, there's always some hurdles. There's always some obstacles to overcome. But the end game is always to do the very best that I can. And that's all I've done.
I love that. I mean, so and this is what I talked about earlier, is like, for you, it's just about just having vision. And the vision doesn't have to be a fixed vision. It could be a fluid vision and then adapting to whatever the circumstances give you. But at the end of the day, just having that strong vision that early in your life that you wanted to go to college for free, paid for. So if it was baseball, basketball, whatever it was, you just had that vision so strong that the vision was so strongly ingrained in you that you knew you were going to get there.
Right.
So
right.
and you took the steps to get there. So
And,
I have
and had it not happened that way, had I not gotten that scholarship to college, my second plan was I'm going to go to the military. And so I was going to do something. So I think if I could say anything about, my young mind it was always thinking about, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do now? Right.
Mhm.
And I had a captain early in my career tell me something that sticks with me to this day. You guys will probably relate. Change is the most difficult thing. He said for a firefighter, but I say for people, period. Change is the most difficult thing for people to deal with. Think about death and dying, life and living. So when a newborn is born into your family and you the father, right? That change, them nights of having 2 hours of sleep and getting up every hour on the hour to feed and change and do those are very difficult moments in a newborn father and mother's life. Change when you change jobs, when you move to New York, when you move to California. All that change is very difficult, and people sometimes stand still in fear of making that change, and they wind up, somewhat rooted in whatever. It could be mediocrity, it could be, substandard conditions, it could be anything wherever they're based currently. So we get affixed to certain things. We become possessive of certain conditions and certain lifestyles that we don't want to change. I remember thinking when my captain retired, man, this is going to be horrible working for somebody new. It was change, so change is always difficult for people to navigate.
So what you're basically saying, even though you have an end game and a strong vision in sight, you still got to be willing to adapt and willing to change if the circumstances change. You can't just be can't be stuck on one idea of how you think things should turn out.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a question for you then. So you told me you're a DJ, right?
Right.
But what type of music you spin?
Oh man, what type of music don't I spin?
Okay.
I've done old school hip hop, rap, R&B, house, you name it. I've done country music. I've done just about anything. I've done everything but a bar mitzvah. That's the one gig I haven't done yet.
Well, you need to come out to LA. We have a big, strong population of people that have bar mitzvahs in LA. Or New York too, right, Kenya?
Yes, there are a lot of them here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So,
I got a guy out there in California, Daryl Boyd, who he's trying to get me out there. So I got to come out there. What part of Cali are you in?
I live in Los Angeles.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll come out there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess this is the final question. What is you're into your music. You're still a firefighter, I assume, right?
I retired in November. Thanksgiving was my last day.
You retired. You saying and now you're retired, and now you're mentoring a lot now. So what do you see yourself in the next 10 years? What is your end game in the next 10 years? What is your legacy or just the vision? Like you said, it's always changing. Circumstances change, but where do you really see yourself in 10 years from now? You still be a very young man. You got a lot to give. So where do you see yourself?
Man, hopefully out there in California with you with the warm weather. I need. That's what I want to be.
Well, come.
My daughter's 13. So my plan, now God always has his plan and don't always align with my plan, but my plan was when I took this job as director of athletics with PAL was to do this for 4 or 5 years while she's in high school and then be on a year-to-year contract after that. So, just saving, making sure that she doesn't have any wants or needs as far as college is concerned, making sure that that's all paid for. So that's again my end game right now is making sure baby girl's taken care of. After that, it's whatever it is. So I'll go wherever. I'll go wherever the warm weather is, and if that means Florida or Texas or wherever, man, go out on my boat and then and be by the water. I'm good with that.
Okay, so you say you're tired of the cold Detroit winters.
Yeah. If I wind up staying here, it would only be for the summer months, and then when wintertime comes, I gotta jet somewhere warm.
Okay, yeah. The heat. Like they said, we are tropical people. We do need to be in the heat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So to add to that, I really envision going over to the motherland. I've never been there. I gotta get there. I'm gonna get to hopefully Ghana within the next year. That's the plan.
Kumasi.
Yeah.
That's where I lived in Kumasi, Ghana.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever did like ancestry.com or anything? Have you ever checked out where your ancestry is or?
My sister has done certain parts of it. She's gone back so far, but never all the way back over to the motherland. We may not even be from there. We don't know, but I'd love to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, guys, that has been awesome. Some of my takeaways from today's conversation. First of all, let me back up. Dave, thank you so much again for your time and visiting with us today. You added a lot of value to our conversation about endgame. A couple of my takeaways are going to be right off the top. Think about what you think about. For me, that resonates so much because oftentimes we get into our thoughts and off on tangents and get off into these fake realities that most times are fear-based or come out of our egos. So that's going to be something I'm going to think about this week. In addition to that, end-game thinking allows you to reframe your obstacles and challenges so that you can see opportunities within those because you have it where you want to go so you don't look at the days situations as being a determinant or being an absolute. It's just a piece of your puzzle. David, in your situation, you plan on going to Detroit Fire Department, ended up in Southfield, and then wind up in, you said in Beverly Hills?
Birmingham.
In Birmingham, beautiful area out there. So I know
Mhm.
any fire you had to put out, it probably had diamonds on it. So I would say you got blessed in that journey. And the final
Yeah.
thing that I got from it, Dave, when we asked the question about when did you become conscious of in-game thinking, I got out of that is that we have to be flexible, and we also have to look at setting maybe shorter goals that allow us to build the momentum, because maybe at that moment you can't see the end, but you can see the next day. And we have
That's
to
right.
work with where we're at. We have to work
Hmm.
where we're at. Richard, I know you got some good stuff.
But I think you hit it right on the nail. Just working where you at, just like this, these sometimes taking small victories. Sometimes when you don't even see the end crystal clear, you have a vision of where you want to go, and you just take these small victories and you just keep on going. You keep up, you keep up, you keep up, you keep showing up. I think just the process of showing up is going to get you to where you need to go. So
Right.
I think in being consistent with that, and that's there's no magic pill to that. There's no special guru that's going to help you in that, but that's really just showing up every day and being consistent with that. And that's what I took away from you transforming from a baseball player to an elite basketball player. You just showed up every day and got better and better every day, and that helped you transform your basketball game.
You're right.
And it
Right.
was cool.
Yeah.
Look how Dave said that the love of basketball came after the work.
Mm.
That's something.
Yeah.
The love
Yeah.
came after the work. So for those people out there that keep falling for the get rich quick scams and all this short term quote unquote success, and I'm gonna do this because I like it or not do that because I don't like it, I'm gonna take that away from David. It's that the love came after you doing the work. So do the work and then assess how you feel about it. Because I tell you this much: once you start getting accolades in anything you do, that becomes motivation to keep doing it.
Right. Yeah. Put in the work and see what happens. That's all we can do. That's all we
Yeah.
can do. Put in the work and see what happens. And it's always easier to put in the work and then ask for the reward later. A lot of people go in and they asking for the world like, hey, but you ain't did nothing yet.
Yeah.
You ain't put in the work.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. That's a great one there. Put in the work and ask for the rewards later. So with that being said, guys, thank you again so much for your time. I want to let you guys know next time we're together again, we're going to have Miss Vaquita Taylor. She's going to talk to us about putting first things first. Now you've become proactive. Now you got the end game. What is your first step? And let's make sure that you come back and visit with us in February at 2 o'clock. Have a great day, guys. Be blessed.
All right
Okay, take
now.
care.
Thanks
Be
for
good
having
with
me.
it.
All right, Richard. Y'all take it easy, man.
Have a good day.
Take care.
All right. All right.